leaders from all across the region. And all of us here in Los Angeles for a simple reason, because we believe in the incredible economic potential of the Americas. I know I do. We all do. I mean, I just think the potential is unlimited. The region is filled with dynamic energy, entrepreneurs who are ready to break out, innovators who will change the way we think and the way we do things, young people poised to seize the future. Everybody, the press always asks me, why am I so optimistic with the way things are? Take a look at all these young folks. They're the best educated. They're the most generous. They're the people who have done the most. They're ready to volunteer, and they're the least prejudiced folks in the world. It's a new generation, and it's an underpinning. It gives me an enormous sense of, and I mean this sincerely, an enormous sense of optimism. We have everything we need right here in the Western Hemisphere, not only to point ourselves toward a future that is more prosperous, secure, and democratic, but the ability to achieve it as well. And for all of you, are essential to making sure we get to this place we have to get to. You know, the private sector is able to move quickly, to mobilize vast amounts of investment capital, as are going to be needed to unlock the enormous potential for growth in this hemisphere, in the region. And when we combine the ability of government to direct economic activity towards specific challenges, to help mitigate risk, guard against unfair practices, and create predictable demand, with the agility of the private sector, I believe we can deliver real improvement for people's lives. I really believe it. You know, just my wife often reminds me that I had a doctor who a long time ago who was saying when I had an aneurysm, he kept saying, is it congenital or is it environmental? And I said, I don't care. I just get it done. He said, you know what your problem is, Senator? I said, no. He said, you're a congenital optimist. But I am. I'm an American. That's why I'm a congenital optimist. So look, I really mean it. We can do anything. Jobs that pay good wages and respect workers' rights. Communities that come to life around investments. Families that can envision a future with an opportunity, just as my dad would say, just give them a little bit of breathing room, a little bit of breathing room. When that happens, everyone prospers, including all of you, all of you. But to achieve this, we've got to update our recipe, in my view, for economic growth. It's time to put a nail in the coffin, in my view, of trickle-down economics. It doesn't work. It keeps in an increasingly smaller and smaller world. It doesn't work. It keeps yielding the same results: greater inequity, slower growth, less competition, and less innovation. In the past few years, we've exposed the weakness of prioritizing short-term profits and working exclusively to maximize efficiency. We learned firsthand the pain that happens when just-in-time supply chains break down or hit a bottleneck. It's a fundamental difference. And you all felt it as well. The COVID-19 pandemic triggered a global economic crisis that we're still digging out of. And now Putin's brutal, unprovoked war in Ukraine has created economic disruptions that are affecting the entire globe. And that's not hyperbole. And these won't be the only shocks we're going to have to navigate. Climate change is increasing the pace and intensity of natural disasters. I leave from here on my way back east. I'm going to be stopping in New Mexico. They've had an incredible impact on their environment of late. Rising inequity and food insecurity around the world can fuel political instability. You all know that. And the question is not if we face another pandemic, it's when we face it, and are we going to be prepared this time? So the economy of the future will increasingly belong to those who place a premium on resilience and reliability, who invest in innovation over the long term and strengthen systems and supply chains now and mitigate the impact of future shocks before they hit. Each of us, the government and the private sector, have a critical role to play. That's why I'm focused on driving economic policies that grow our economy from the bottom up and the middle out. Because quite frankly, when that works, everybody does well. And the wealthy do very, very well. No one gets hurt. No one gets hurt. For example, here in the United States, we're making a generational investment in our infrastructure. We used to be #1 in the world when I first came to the United States Congress. Now we're number 13 in the world. 13. I don't have to tell business people what that means in terms of economic growth. But we're fixing that. That's going to be the benefit to the entire region. We're investing $1.2 trillion bipartisanly to upgrade our infrastructure, to fix crumbling roads and bridges and ports, airports all across the country. That's going to help you get goods to market faster while creating good-paying union jobs. And I know a lot of you don't like my saying union, but union jobs to support working families, because that's what's happening. Everyone benefits. Everybody wins when that occurs. And the return on our investment is going to strengthen U.S. competitiveness throughout the 21st century. You know, this is the same approach we're taking across America's Partnership for Economic Prosperity. Many of the countries in our region qualify as middle-income countries. But that label doesn't remove the persistent structural challenges that run in deep inequity. Middle income means you don't get the benefit of a lot of opportunities. So we can change that. Help governments make life better, easier, and fairer for the peoples by using hemispheric multinational financial institutions to modernize and mobilize greater levels of private investment and create good-paying jobs. I know the real barriers for you to contend with. That's why we want to work with you to level the playing field. As I said last night, the United States is prepared to put new capital in the Inter-American Development Bank's private sector lending arm, the IDB Invest, to help catalyze the flow of private capital into the region, especially to support startups, digital connectivity, and renewable energy and health. For example, we need to make it easier for countries in Latin America and the Caribbean to develop their 5G infrastructure without having to choose between investing in their digital future or renewable energy structure. To be able to do both, we need to unlock the financing so both can be done at the same time. We want to make sure our closest neighbors have a real choice between the debt trap development that has become more and more common in the region, and the high-quality, transparent approach to infrastructure and investment that delivers lasting gains for workers and their families. And by working through the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation to lower the risk around these kinds of investments, support policy reforms, and improve investment and climate in countries. Excuse me, the climate of investment in these countries. And level the playing field. We're going to open up new areas of private sector investors that are not only economically viable, but are highly desirable. You know, over the course of this summit, the governments are coming together to make significant concrete commitments across a range of issues vital to achieving sustainable and equitable growth throughout the region. On bringing supply chains closer to home, on fostering innovation and developing a shared framework for our digital future, on kicking our action on climate change into high gear and speeding our clean energy transition, on bolstering health systems and food security in the Western Hemisphere, on managing safe and orderly migration as a shared responsibility through innovative and coordinated action to enforce our borders and stabilize migrant populations while seizing a shared opportunity for economic growth. My challenge to all of you is, if you step up and play a bigger role in driving inclusive, sustainable, equitable growth in the 21st century, a lot's going to happen. What more can you do to engage in these issues to shape our future? Not as a favor to me or to any government leader, but because it's your own overwhelming economic self-interest. If you make the investments necessary to build more secure and resilient supply chains, that's ultimately going to bring down your costs and make you more competitive and boost your bottom line. You're going to hear from John Kerry about the opportunities for private sector innovation and new markets that will be critical to reach our climate goals. Yesterday, Vice President Harris spoke about the $3.2 billion mobilized by our call to action efforts in Central America, including from several companies in this room, to bring quality economic opportunity to the region. We're expanding the 100,000 Strong in the Americas program to focus on opportunities for young people in climate and STEM fields, especially in the Caribbean and Central America. And I urge you to join us with matching funds, just as you did when we launched the program 10 years ago. There are many more examples, but let me close with this. We stand at an inflection point. I know you're tired of hearing me say this when I was running, and I continue to say it every day. We're at an inflection point. More is going to change in the next 10 years than has changed in the last 30 years in the world. Decisions we make today are going to have far-reaching impacts on our future. They're going to last well into the middle of this century. And business leaders, you all see where the trend lines are pointing as clearly as I do. And our challenge is to shape the outcomes so the future reflects democratic values of our region, an economy that we want to live and work in, and that ensures a fair playing field for our workers and our businesses. As we navigate this inflection point, leaders and business and those who come out ahead are going to be the people who are going to lead this change for the future, not those stuck looking backwards and sitting on the sidelines. None of us will be able to fully realize our ambition for the region on our own. So let's use this summit to tackle the obstacles to growth, come together around new ideas and new opportunities to take our region's biggest challenges on and defeat them. And for all of us to prosper. I really believe there is nothing we're unable to do, and I think we're primed. We're primed. And I'll close with this, I'm going to say a little later at the general session. I find no reason why the Western Hemisphere, over the next 10 years, does not develop into the most democratic hemisphere in the world, most democratic region in the entire world. We have everything. We have the people, we have the resources, and we have more democracies in this hemisphere than any other hemisphere. So there's a lot we can do, but a lot of it matters on the private enterprise side of the equation. You all are the font of enormous ideas and opportunities. So I want to thank you all, and I look forward to working with you. And every time I walk out of my grandpa Finnegan's house, he said, "Joey, keep the faith." And my grandmother, "No, Joey, spread it. Spread the faith." Thank you. Appreciate it.
And we've been listening to President Biden speaking to business leaders at the Summit of the Americas. The president says he is happy to welcome innovators who will help develop the Western Hemisphere.
He also said he is encouraged by the partnership between the private and public sectors. The president also said the region needs to strengthen supply chains and infrastructure before the next pandemic or economy-changing event.
CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us now from Los Angeles. Hi, Ed. So we just heard the president speak at day 2 of the summit. Remind us what else is going on there today.
Yes, this was a gathering on the sidelines of the summit of CEOs from large multinational companies who are also here in town, because this is a great opportunity for them to also speak with the leaders of the region and work on their economic development plans in that part of the world. So this was sort of a courtesy to stop by that meeting. He's now headed over here to the main summit site to have some conversations this afternoon with other leaders. And this is all part of an ongoing conversation about a host of regional issues: economic development, health, especially in the wake of the pandemic, and how to make sure that enough people in this hemisphere are being vaccinated against COVID-19, among other health concerns. Talk of a new economic framework, I mentioned that, and then climate change and immigration generally, but not just immigration in the United States, but immigration patterns across the region. Not expected to see many concrete deliverables come out of this meeting, but it is designed to keep these countries in relative cooperation. You heard him there say at the end that he wants this to be the most democratic, lowercase d, democratic part of the world, and that's part of the reason this whole summit, which is held about every 3 years, is being held, usually led by the United States, to encourage the continued development of democracies on this side of the globe.
Ed, this will be the first time President Biden sits down with Brazilian President Bolsonaro. Apparently there was some back and forth about the content of their meeting. What can you tell us about that?
So the Brazilians had essentially signaled that they didn't want to talk much about climate change or environmental policy. The United States says that all potential topics are on the table, and we'll hear later what exactly they discussed. The concern is that Brazil continues its deforestation policy across the Amazon, which may be good short term for the economy of Brazil, but is pretty bad for the rest of the world when it comes to CO2 levels, given that part of the world has been so helpful, of course, in dealing with that. And so we'll see to what extent the president brings that up. The other issue, of course, is the fact that Bolsonaro, who was tight with President Trump, was among the world leaders who didn't necessarily embrace reality and the results of the 2020 election. And he himself is on the ballot for re-election, though may face a strong challenge from former Brazilian President Lula. So this is one of those kinds of meetings that has great geopolitical intrigue, but also is going to have a big effect back home in the case of President Bolsonaro. These two leaders have not met face-to-face so far. Bolsonaro did not get a phone call or have a chance to speak with Biden after he was elected because he was kept at arm's length, given what he had done and said in regards to the Trump administration. But it's one of only two major face-to-face meetings the president is having, the other one with the Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau, in part because the Mexican president isn't here and the leaders of the Northern Triangle countries, which the United States obviously has a big concern with, given immigration, they won't be here either.
That's right. And Ed, while the president was speaking, we saw that more baby formula is arriving from overseas. This delivery is in Texas. So what can you tell us about that delivery?
This is the fifth shipment as part of the Operation Fly Formula program that was set up by the administration in the last few weeks in response to the baby formula shortage. As I understand it, this is more than 50 tons of formula being flown into Fort Worth by Nestle from Germany, enough for about 1.6 million 8-ounce bottles, and it's going to be available across the